So, dear participants, welcome to the sixth session of our wonderful conference. And we love seeing your activity in the chat, so please keep it up. Now we're going to, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. So he's having a Master of Science in Psychology of Education and being a representative of Brest-Tissol's Mind, Brain and Education Special Interest Group. He's the person whose blog at edcrocs.com has been accessed more than 40,000 times by people from more than 160 countries. Please welcome Andre Hadland, who's going to talk about teachers' mental health in these turbulent times we're living in. Thank you very much, Andre. Now it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you very much to everyone organizing this amazing conference. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. And it's funny to look back and think that a couple of years ago, I was basically doing events here where I live in Brazil. And now, I've done a couple of webinars in Romania, in Russia, in Ukraine, even in India and Pakistan, which means that I'm probably talking about the right topics because people want to hear what I have to say. And I hope that's the case today again, because I brought an incredibly relevant topic that we don't talk about so much, at least not in a straightforward way. We go around it and we mask and we try to hide whatever we're feeling, but we don't really talk about something that defines whether you are going to have good quality life or not. So I'm going to start sharing my screen with you. And you should see an elephant in the room, because that's what we say when there's something huge, something that is visible. It's right there, right in front of us, but we don't address it. And I think that's the case, when we're talking about teachers' mental health in the pandemic. But I'm not really going to address exactly what is going on in the pandemic, particularly only that. I think that many of the things I'm going to talk about here today are applicable anywhere else in different contexts, different times, because it's about mental health in general. And I want to check your mental health as well. I want you to reflect on it as we go through the slides. So here's the contact information in case you want to know a little bit more about my work. Nowadays, I'm a consultant in Brazil. I work as a bilingual program mentor, which means that I supervise schools and teachers who have chosen to implement our bilingual program. So as you can probably imagine, I talk to many teachers every day, and I get to listen to what they are going through, their struggles, what is happening in their lessons. And as you can probably imagine, because maybe that's what's happening with you, the pandemic has turned everything upside down. Suddenly, we were thrown at this, scenario that we have to learn how to use different skills, basically overnight, so that we can keep, the wheel turning. Basically, we have to keep our students, engaged. We have to make sure that they are getting education, they're getting some sort of lesson. So, what kind of impact does that have on our mental health? So the sequence I'm going to follow is, let's talk a little bit about you. And then I'm going to use my life story, my recent life story, to share with you some of the things that we should be aware of when we talk about mental health. So I'm going to talk about the taxi, the lake, the mascot, the wall, the news, and what then. I'm going to give you some practical tips for you to look after your mental health. So let's start with you. I hope you all have a QR code scanner. If you don't, I'm going to share in the chat box right now a link for you to help me build a word cloud, okay? And really, I really want to listen to you. I want you to, since it's anonymous, you can share whatever you want, anything really. I want you to say, what have you been feeling in this, terrible time of pandemic? So there you go. The link is right there in the chat box. You can use a very short sentence, or you can use some words, some, adjectives, whatever you want. What have you been feeling in the pandemic? And I'm going to share with you what some of the teachers here in Brazil have told me. All right. So let me stop sharing the screen just a second so we can go back to the Mentimeter. Okay, some words are coming up right now. Yes, let me share the Mentimeter with you so you can look at the words as well. Agitation, suppressed, overwhelmed, fear, exhausted, stressed out, anxious, inspired. I'm glad to see some positive words there. Excited, transformation, insecure. We can clearly see a trend now, can't we? Tired, everybody's tired. Mentally exhausted, I'd say. Yes, tired, stressed, uncertainty. They are all very similar to the words that I got from my teachers here in Brazil. Anxious, tension, great, fear, yes, transformation, wonderful. Now, I'm going to share with you some of the words that my teachers told me. And, of course, I'm going to protect their identities, but some of them have said that they are feeling like they want to hurt themselves. Some of them are feeling like they have lost touch with their loved ones. Some of them are feeling paranoid that they might get COVID-19 and maybe they will even die. Some of them are feeling that they have no respect, from their peers or from their, managers or from people who are working with them, because they are required to do so much work, so much more work than they used to. Some of them have no idea how to handle being a teacher and a parent at the same time. So helping their kids, watch the online lessons and stick to whatever they have to do. So there's a wide range of everything you can imagine. It's always a spectrum. It's never a binary thing. So people are feeling many different things. And that's completely normal. That's exactly my message here. It is normal for us to feel like that because that's how the brain works. We're going through an unprecedented situation in which more than 1 billion students are out of their schools because of a global pandemic. And that's what the brain does. So the brain anticipates scenarios based on what's happening, and that will come out as an emotional response. So if you were not feeling those things, you would probably not be human. So if it is normal, if it is natural, why don't we address it? Why don't we talk about it? So let me tell you about my life, and then hopefully I will send a message to all of you thinking about your mental health. So last year, the taxi, I was in Barcelona after a wonderful conference called Innovate ELT. I was a presenter there. I was with my wife, and then we had to get a taxi to go to the airport. So we had breakfast, we packed, we had everything ready. We took the taxi, and then the driver started checking my flight. And you know what? I confused. I actually got the airport wrong. We were not going to the Barcelona airport. We were going to an airport in a different city, which was quite far. It's in Reus, which is about 1 hour or more than 1 hour drive to get there. And, we were very lucky that we still had time to get there. And I had no idea why. I've been positive and optimistic my whole life, and I thought that I had done everything right, that I had booked everything right, But then something happened to me for the very first time in my life while we were going to that other airport. I had a panic attack inside the taxi because I have no idea. I just felt like, I couldn't breathe. I started sweating. I was worried that we wouldn't make it, that we had to buy other, tickets to get to the UK. So many things just went through my head that I couldn't control myself. I never felt like that before. It was a horrible feeling. And, I never felt like that again. But then there is something that I got from this episode, which is toxic positivity. So I have always been very optimistic and very positive about things and smiling all the time. And then anyone who has ever talked to me will say, yeah, he's a fun guy. He likes to have fun and talk and be very enthusiastic. But there are times that we cannot be like that because we're going through a very difficult time in our lives. And that's what people expect of us, to be fun all the time, to be positive all the time. So self-help books, they're going to help you become happier because that's what you have to be. That's what society is telling us to do, to be, right? So yeah, definitely true. Ken Wilson just confirmed that. I'm a very positive guy, right? But this is a very negative thing, because we have to acknowledge what we're feeling, because our feelings, they tell us that something is going on, and we have to prepare for whatever is going on. So when people come to you and say, well, you get over it, don't be so negative, always look at the bright side, failure is not an option, think happy thoughts, it could be worse. You know what they're doing? They're basically suppressing or asking you to suppress what you're feeling. And you are feeling like that because there's something about to happen, something that might be very negative, something that might be very stressing is about to happen, and your body has to be ready to face that situation. So I think one of the things we should be aware of and we should avoid is toxic positivity. So if a teacher comes to you and says that I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm exhausted, you don't tell them that things are going to get better. You listen to them. You let them express their feelings, because that, we have a lot of evidence. Gross and Levinson, they have talked about that in an academic paper that actually says that toxic positivity is very negative for our mental health, because we have to be able to express what we're feeling without judgment, right? And then a couple of days before the taxi episode, I was in Sweden with my wife. And then this is a picture we took at a beautiful lake that is very close to where my half sister lives in Sweden. So my dad was Swedish. That's why the last name Hedlund, right? And my dad passed away in January last year. I was in the UK for my master's, and I couldn't come back. I couldn't come back to Brazil for the funeral. My dad wanted to be cremated, right? That was his dream. He said that. So he was cremated. And then my wife brought his ashes to Europe. And that's where we scattered his ashes, in this beautiful place in Sweden. Some, part of his ashes because he was Swedish, but also Brazilian in heart, right? So we basically took him back to his origins. And I had no idea how much of an impact that would cause. So it was 1 week before the taxi episode. And I think those things are connected, because we have this need for closure. So if we are going through a very complicated, very stressful, very boring, uncomfortable, painful situation, we want to stop that. We want to put a lid on that and not go back. The opposite is also true. If we're going, through something very exciting, something that actually makes us feel great, we don't want that to stop. So we have to have closure for certain things, right? So sometimes our mental health is not doing okay because there was no closure for whatever happened in your life. Maybe you went through a very painful experience, or maybe you're experiencing mental exhaustion because of all the work that you have to do, but there's something that is really affecting you, and we need to get over. We have to get past that, and the only way we can is if we talk to someone, if we share something with someone, if we connect with someone, right? And then the mascot. And this is funny because this happened years before. Why is the title of my talk The Elephant in the Room? Because I'm a guy known, sort of popular because of my elephant, Mr. Trunk. And here he is. There he is, Mr. Trunk. He's been traveling all over the world. If you want to know about his adventures, you can check hashtag Mr. Trunk travels. He's been to, as you can see, to Paris, to Zurich, Bristol. He lived in Bristol with me in the UK. He's been all over, to 20 countries actually so far. And one of the reasons why I wanted to show you Mr. Trunk is because Mr. Trunk made me connect more with my students as a teacher. So I was going through a very complicated period. I didn't know if I wanted to stay a teacher. I was studying, international relations. I was beginning a master's course in political science, and then I realized that I didn't want to stay to continue, in that profession because I was working too hard, too much, and then I think people know what that can cause, burnout. And then I realized that what I wanted to do is to make sure that I had a special bond with my students. So I was walking in a mall here in my city, and I saw inside the shop this funny little guy, Mr. Trunk, a stuffed elephant. And then I said, you know what? Maybe I can buy this and then, send it with my students to their homes so that he can be integrated into their family's routine or whatever. And then they can bring back with photos or videos so they can actually bring some authentic materials that they have produced so we can use in the classroom. And that is true. It actually worked much better than I could have ever expected. Mr. Trunk has traveled the world now. And then he became part of our ongoing project. And you know what? We know from neuroscientific evidence that this connection is so important because if you feel rejected by other human beings, you are going to experience the same sort of pain that you go through when you have physical pain. Social pain hurts like physical pain. So the need for connection is very important. Are we connecting with people? Do we have friends we can talk to? Do we have meaningful relationships with our students, our peers, our colleagues, the people we work with? Because if we feel rejected, you will see activation of the anterior cingulate cortex, which is also activated when you have physical pain. So it hurts as if somebody just punched you or did something worse to you. So we need to find that connection. And then the wall. So after we barely made it, but we were there in the airport, and then we got our plane back to London, and then I went back to the University of Bristol. I found out about this incredible service that they offered. It was called the Big White Wall because I needed to talk to someone. I needed professional help. I needed to open up. I needed to, share my feelings. And I can do that in a very anonymous sort of, way so that I don't get exposed. But, I didn't have any issues with being exposed, but some people do. So that's what they offer. So you can talk to people, you can talk to graduate students who are probably taking psychology or psychology of education. You can talk to therapists, and you don't even have to go there if you don't want to. You can do it online. And that's very important. And then that brought me to this realization that the wall is what separates us, because we have a wall, we have a stigma when it comes to getting professional help, when it comes to getting a therapist to work with you. But the wall is also a place that we can share things. We can post things on the wall. We can, I'm crazy about post-its. Every teacher is, right? So we love post-its. So imagine a big white wall where everybody can write something on a post-it and they can just put there, and then everybody can read. So the wall doesn't just separate us. It also unites us, right? We can share our feelings. We can be together somehow. So that's what they did for me. And you know what? They gave me validation. Again, there's a stigma when we talk about mental health. What we need from people and from institutions is that they listen to us and they don't judge us, because emotions are not good or bad. According to Lisa Barrett Feldman, for example, emotions are kind of like clouds if you think of them. Let's use an analogy, because when you look at a cloud, it could be very white and fluffy and beautiful. It could actually resemble an animal, or it could be very dark, sort of heavy, as if the world is going to end. But they're not good or bad. They're just telling us what the weather will be like, you know? So they're just, we look at the clouds so we can predict if it's going to be a sunny day or a rainy day. So we have to look at emotions like that. In our society, we label certain emotions as negative emotions as if we cannot or should not experience them. So we suppress them. And that's very bad for us. That's really, really bad for us, you know? So if I'm feeling afraid, if I'm feeling, I don't know, maybe scared, my body is telling me something. It's telling me to get ready for something. It's a way for me to anticipate what's going on. And Lisa Barrett says that we can control our emotions. You know, it happens. Of course, it's a physiological thing that is normally modulated, controlled in the limbic system inside your brain. But you can use your conscious brain, your prefrontal cortex, to control that, to inhibit certain things when you need to. So we have control over our emotions. That's very important to know. Now, a brain break that I wanted to try with you because I love brain breaks. And I think you're probably very tired now. Some people are having a glass of wine and some chocolate, right? So I wanted you, and you don't have to show your faces if you don't want to, you know, I wanted to take 2 minutes to meditate a little bit with you because I'm going to tell you how you can do it at home, okay? So I want you to actually close your eyes. So you're going to close your eyes for a couple of seconds, and you're just going to inhale and exhale as I tell you to do that, okay? Just listen to my voice. So you can start closing your eyes right now. Listen to my calming voice. So inhale and exhale. Inhale, exhale. Now try to feel your body. You know, feel the tip of your toe. Locate that in your body. Just inhale and exhale. You know, forget about everything that's going on outside there. Just feel your body. You know, feel your chest moving up and down. Inhale and exhale. Right? So now you can slowly open your eyes. Does that feel good? Do you feel better? Do you feel like you've oxygenated your body? We have a lot of evidence that that works very well, that we should be doing that more often, right? And I'm going to show you why. Now, the bad news. So I'm going to give you the bad news and the good news and what we can do. So read this one, please. Yeah? Does that make sense? Yeah. You know, since we are language teachers here, I think a lot of you are probably going, oh, she forgot the question mark, right? Didn't she? Isn't it a question? Yes. But yes, so that the bad news is that a lot of what's going on now that affects our mental health is systemic. And I'm afraid we don't really have a lot of say. It's very structural. It's just how we work, how society has decided that work has to be, that we have to be productive all the time and we have to be always happy. So a lot of it is really structural and we have very little control over that, right? But again, and more bad news, I suppose this is probably the worst news, is that teaching in particular is a profession that is characterized by high levels of burnout or emotional exhaustion, right? So unfortunately, that's us. We are teachers and we have to deal with that. And then, of course, if you think about it, that picture of a teacher. So when you look for a picture of a teacher on Google, you always see a happy person, you know, doing something and talking to the students. But we know that it's not the case always. But there are things that we can do, and that's the good news. Actually, they're based on the 6 elements to self-care by the National Institute of Mental Illness. So what are the things that we have to do? We have to take care of our physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, social, and professional needs. So, and I know that sounds like a cliche probably. We know that, don't we? We know that we have to have a social life and a professional life, and we have to balance things and everything. But how much time do we actually spend to really think of those things and to think of the things we are doing to meet those needs, right? Do you? And here are some of the suggestions so that we can go into the Q&A session. The first thing that I can tell you, what are the options that you have as a teacher? Professional help may be needed. And I know that sometimes you could be going through a very difficult phase. You could actually be depressed. That's an option. You could be anxious. You could be, and maybe you are not going to look for help yourself. And maybe you're not going to tell anyone. So what I can tell you right now, it can get worse. So you have to talk to someone you trust, someone you love, so that maybe they will be the person who will help you get help. You know, it works. Therapy works well. We have a lot of evidence to suggest that. But you know what? Something else that we can do, and that the science is very, explicit about that. We can try to avoid cognitive distortions, polarized thinking. Like, nowadays on social media, everybody is polarized, right? We are in bubbles. And then when we go through, when we scroll down, we see that there's so much hate everywhere, and we get anxious. I hate looking at comments on Facebook because if it makes me feel like, what is going on with the world, right? So we have to avoid, and you know what? It's always a spectrum. Don't believe that the world is black and white. It's a spectrum. Emotional thinking, like the clouds, there aren't bad or good emotions. There are emotions that serve a purpose because they're getting our body ready for something. Don't assume you can read people's minds. Ask them questions. If you are dealing with a person and you feel like, they don't like me, why aren't they doing what they're supposed to do? Ask them a question, because sometimes we cannot anticipate why they're acting in a certain way. There is the feeling of pervasiveness. It's like, you get a small sample and you generalize, like it's always going to be like that. So maybe your students said that they don't want to read, they don't like to read. They do like to read. They read their texts on WhatsApp or on Facebook. They don't like to read boring texts, maybe stuff that they are not interested in. So you cannot judge the whole by looking at just a small sample. And permanence, things will pass, just like clouds. Things are going to get better, maybe they'll get worse, but they will pass and something else is going to come. So you can try to avoid those. And then to wrap up, I have a couple of tips that I got from many teachers, many experts, and things that you can actually start doing that will have an impact on your mental health. Meditation is great because you basically, you unplug from what's going on in the world and you feel your body and you breathe. That's very good for your body. Exercise is great for your body. Maybe we are not getting enough exercise because of the pandemic, but we know that we release certain neurotransmitters in our brains that make us feel very good. I took on gardening. So I have a bunch of herbs here. I live in an apartment here in Brazil. I have mint, I have sage, I have all kinds of, basil, everything right there. And so I can cook with them. And cooking also is great. Listening to music could be sometimes, if you like heavy metal and you live on your own, don't disturb your neighbors. They're preparing their lessons, but you can probably listen to very loud heavy metal music. So to sort of, kick your demons away from you, right? You can also do series and movies. I've been watching a lot of wonderful documentaries because I love documentaries about everything. And, wonderful, touching movies that will make us reflect. We can do that as well. Reading. I have so many books here on my shelves that I haven't read. So I try to read one by one. It will take me 2 lifetimes, but still, I'm trying, right? and connecting. So my wife and I adopted a cat who had to amputate one of her paws because she was in an accident, but we're still trying to adapt because she doesn't like her older brother who was here before her. But things are happening someday. So we're connecting with friends through conference calls, and we're keeping in touch with people, with human beings. What's your list? I invite you to think of your list of the things that will make you feel better. And this is the last slide, I promise. The elephant in the room exists. It's big. It needs to be addressed. It's something that we don't talk so much about. But if you become a friend, if you guys become friends, you and your elephant, just like me and Mr. Trunk, and you can make your elephant smaller, your elephant will fit inside your pocket, and you can take your elephant all over the world, and it can mean something to a lot of people. That's what my students did with this elephant. It took the world. It has been to 20 countries already. So talk about your elephant. Use your elephant. It's right there in the living room. Don't ignore your elephant. Make your elephant acknowledged by people so that you can take this with you and share with the world. And then you will be taking better care of your mental health. Thank you very much, everyone. You can follow me on edcrocks.com. That's my blog. And of course, if you want more contact information, you can send me an email or follow us on Instagram as well. Now, let's take some questions and comments.
Yeah, that is like, it was so lovely to listen to you that I was kind of, what is it called, zoned out.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so first, the question that was asked was, how would you go about talking with a colleague about them needing psychological help? Because it's a very
Yes.
sensitive issue.
Yes. This is a very delicate issue, I think. I think one of the things that we can do as at the institutional level, because you're working at a school, is that you can talk to managers and the directors so that dealing with your mental health becomes part of what they do. It's not stigmatized anymore. It's not something, we used to think of people who have some sort of mental condition or they're not dealing very well with their mental health as people who are not strong enough. And we know that's not the case. We have a lot of evidence to show, psychological evidence, neuroscientific evidence to show that sometimes we just go through very difficult moments in our lives as an emotional response to whatever is happening. So you need to make that natural somehow. So at an institutional level, if you're going to do that, or at the individual level, you telling your colleague,
Mhm.
I'd say ask a lot of questions. I can see Ron is right there, and he talked about inquiry-based teaching and learning. And I think we have to get to the root of the problem. We have to listen to what they're going through and asking questions and sort of suggesting that, what, so why have you ever talked to anyone about that? Have you ever considered, not telling them what they should do, but asking them to consider and reflect what options are out there for them, right? And maybe I'd say, like Ken Wilson said, with colleagues, have a group discussion. I think part of our CPD should probably address that. So maybe instead of talking about, the latest development in methodology, we can talk about things that we can do for us to take better care of our mental health, right?
Loads of ideas. As a co-owner of a language school, who's rather manager myself, I have to take care about mental health of my teachers. So thank you very much
Yes,
for sharing this precious information. There was
my
also
pleasure.
a question about what can we do to overcome the stigma of getting psychological help. In Russia, there is stigma. There
Yes,
is.
in Brazil too. Yes, I think in many countries. Yeah. This is harder, I think. I'm not sure I can give you a very good answer because I feel like that's cultural in many respects. And I feel that we need to have a very open discussion with everyone, from policymakers down to the individual level of every professional out there. And one of the things that we can do maybe is have more talks like this one here so that people can know about that. I think that in every conference that we're talking about any profession really, we're talking about whoever, there has to be a slot for mental health issues, because then we make it more natural. And I will tell you this, Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychiatry, right? He was more of a philosopher to me than a scientist, because a lot of the things that he proposed are not even testable. I mean, we cannot even come up with an experiment to check whether they're true or not. Some of the other things that he mentioned could even be considered pseudoscience, because now we have neuroimaging studies showing that there is no id, maybe the way that that the unconscious, subconscious entity that has a personality of its own, like he proposes, that probably doesn't exist. You have the subconscious level, but it's not something that is aware of things, right? So, but again, because of the work he did, now people go to therapy. So before Sigmund Freud, people, they were locked up in an institution, and they were shocked. Electroshocking was an effective therapy. It may be still for certain conditions, but they used it for everything, and they tortured people out of their condition. That doesn't work. But again, somebody proposed that, somebody studied that, somebody talked about that, and now we are much better. A couple of 100 years after, we're much better. So we have to keep talking about those things until they become part of our society, of what we do as professionals, as human beings, right?
It's good to know that there is some development in this area. So Ron wants to join our conversation. Do you mind if he does?
No, please do, Ron.
Thanks, Andre. I just wanted to say two things really quickly. There's a long list of things that we can do. And,
Yes.
this was just an unbelievable situation. But, I found time to redo my home and make it really, because I knew that the lockdown would last a long time. And I went through
Yes.
my house and I just went through every room and I just threw away things that were just not necessary and letting go. It was such a
Yes.
cleansing process. So I was cleaning, but really going through that psychological process of just letting go of needless things and putting
Yes.
importance on things that really mean something to us. This is
Exactly.
really important. And redoing our living, where we live and where we're going to be locked down, it's
Yep.
really, really important.
That's a
Important. And
great
I tell
example. Yeah.
everybody, I have
Yeah.
the cleanest house in Germany.
Well done. That's exactly, that brings me to closure, right? It's like there's something that I have
Yes,
to
and I
get
feel
rid
so
of, right?
good
Yes.
about being home.
Yes.
I feel proud, and that's good. I can't have anybody here. I
Wonderful.
wanted to add one
Wonderful.
thing, Andre, if that's okay. And
Yeah.
Marjorie Rosenberg started a group for teachers and educators. It's called Staying Positive. It's a Facebook group, and come and join us where we all share positive stories. It's a
Yes.
space for us as teachers to quit talking about teaching, get away from politics, and
Yeah.
just share, nice stories and pictures. And it's an uplifting experience. And we meet on Zoom as well. And we just talk about things that are important to us. And it's
Yes.
not about teaching. And yes, we do all need personal learning networks, but we also need support groups in this very
Most definitely.
hard time. So I'm inviting everyone here today. Come join us
Wonderful.
on Staying
Yes.
Positive. Marjorie Rosenberg started that group.
Yes.
Teachers from all over the world, and we need some more Russians in there too.
Yeah,
Definitely.
So definitely come and
Wonderful,
join
Ron.
us.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you for
I
mentioning.
just wanted to share
Support
that.
groups. Yeah, that's
yeah,
perfect. We have to connect with people, right? So
that
that's wonderful.
that's exactly what we need right now in these times. There was,
Yeah.
I think it's kind of rhetorical question about like if a matured mind reacted that way to the problems that we're
Yes.
facing, what happens to what happens in the children's heads?
Yes, I will use my brain now to talk about this. I never go anywhere without my brain, my half brain. But one of the things that we know from neuroscientific evidence is that the inner structures of our brains, the ones that are actually deep down there below the cortex, the pink part, right? They are responsible for, emotions or emotional responses, like the limbic system. We have a bunch of things like the hypothalamus, the amygdala, even the cerebellum. So you have a lot of things that will activate, or there's a trigger when there's an environmental stimulus, or even an internal stimulus from your body, something going on inside. And then that will basically signal to your cortex so that you do something about it, right? So if you ignore it, it's there. There's an alarm that went off, right? But then how can we control that? We can never really suppress our emotions. Like, we can control them. We can hold them back a little bit for us to do whatever we have to do. And that's something that will require the use of your prefrontal cortex, which is in your frontal lobe. And according to the latest evidence, I can tell you that we are teenagers till we are around 25, 27 years old, because that's basically how long it takes you to fully develop your prefrontal cortex. And before you can fully develop your prefrontal cortex, your inhibitory control is not very good. That's why kids are we know kids, right? We've been teaching kids. They're very impulsive because they cannot really tell their limbic system to kind of, calm down. Now you have to do this. So yes, there are many different ways when you compare how kids respond to mental health issues and adults respond to mental health issues. In a way, I'd say that adults, they can hide it better because of this fully developed prefrontal cortex. They can kind of, sort of use their conscious brain, conscious mind to sort of do whatever they have to do. Kids, because they don't have that fully developed yet, they cannot hide it that well normally, because it's very impulsive, just comes out like that. So a mature brain can deal better with emotions and trauma and all of that, but it can also hide it much better. So then we never know what people are going through, especially when they are adults. When kids want something and they get frustrated and you don't give it to them, you can tell that they are frustrated. They will cry, they will they will definitely do something that will show you that they're frustrated because they didn't get what they wanted. When an adult wants something and you tell them that they can't have it, but it's really something that they really want, they can hide it well, so, and then you don't know what the impact of that will be on their mental health, because of how mature their brains are, right?
And how well they know about their mental health and how they can cope with it, and how they do they admit that they have these emotions, or they try to conceal them somehow.
Yeah, so yes, and this is a very important question. I know we have just a few minutes, but I can say that because of the stigma, a lot of people will just try to hide what they're feeling because they're supposed to look strong. People who have depression, again, if you have depression, there's something not working properly in your brain. Maybe your dopamine receptors are not working very well, or you're not producing a lot of dopamine. And dopamine is the neuromodulator that gives you the feeling that I want to do. I really feel like doing things. If you don't have that working properly, you don't feel like doing things. You want to stay home. You want to stay in bed, right? Doesn't work well. And then again, there's also the amygdala in the brain that is responsible for the FFF response, the fight, flight, or freeze response. And it gets activated when we are in a potentially dangerous situation. It doesn't have to be dangerous, but we have to perceive it as a dangerous situation. And it could be a socially dangerous situation, like I'm going to expose myself and then people are going to laugh and they're going to humiliate me. So your amygdala is activated. And then that means you cannot really access your prefrontal cortex very well because you are focusing on staying alive, like the song goes, right? So you're trying to stay alive, you're trying to survive. You cannot really use your higher cognitive functions to do anything well. So that's why when kids are in the classroom and they're intimidated, they're frustrated, they are scared, they cannot really access the parts of the brain that are responsible for higher order learning, right? And the same thing for us. So that's why we have to always have a welcoming environment where people can connect with one another. They can share what their feelings, and we have to stop stigmatizing feelings and emotions, because you know what? They are just clouds. They will pass. They are telling you what the weather will be like in the next few seconds. And, you know, if it's a big black cloud, it's probably going to rain. Maybe there's a thunderstorm coming, but it will pass. If it's a nice fluffy cloud, maybe it's a sunny day, you know, who knows? That's the idea.
Andre, thank you for sharing those that much value thoughts, really, because just like to wrap it all up, it means that, dear colleagues, we need to be more attentive to each other these days, more attentive than ever to our students, and we need to establish those connections to make sure that we create this safe environment where we can
Yes.
share our feelings and emotions. Andre, thank you very much for tackling this problem. I have many more questions right now, and I'm sure all of us we have now, and we can subscribe to Andre, and yeah, and we can post those questions in our Facebook group.
Definitely. Yeah.
So
if I may say two words,
yeah, of
empathy
course.
and patience, you know, just look, we have a social brain, so take care of one another, show some empathy, and, you know, have some patience. And families, they have been interfering with what we do in the classroom because now they can see, you know, a lesson, but they need to understand that we are the experts who know how to teach. They have to understand that we're trying to do the best for their kids, and we have to understand that families are overwhelmed with everything that they have to do. So empathy and patience, and maybe things will get better. It will pass. We don't know what's coming, but it will pass.
Yes, that is lovely. So thank you very much. That was like, you know, if this talk was some kind of, I can't say food, but my association is like, it's like a chocolate mousse or souffle. It's so really
Oh,
nice,
great.
and it's very, you know, warming inside. So thank you very much, Andre.
My
So
pleasure.
please say if you want to listen to other talks, and now we have about like 8-minute break so we can relax. Maybe, you know, have a small meditation. Yes, breathe
Yes.
in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out.
Yes. Check out Headspace, very good app for you to meditate. You take 10 minutes off your day, go somewhere when you can see some flowers and, you know, somewhere quiet, and then do it. Thank you very much, everyone here in the chat box. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you.